This video is sponsored by Describe. Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where I break down the lessons we can learn, as GMs and as players, from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're tackling episode 72, The Elephant in the Room. Thanks for your patience. I was actually planning on uploading this video on January 2nd, in keeping with my typical Thursday upload schedule, but it was delayed, mostly not because of New Year's Eve, but because my kid was teething really bad. On the night I was going to record this, tooth number 8 was breaking through, so I just decided, you know what, it's more important for me to get some sleep than to film this video. Man, I have so many ambitious plans for this year, but I've also got a 9-month-old, so there's going to be some interesting juggling in my future. Wish me luck. Anyway, on with the show. Ashley is back in New York, so Matt is handling Pike. She'll mainly be hanging out in the background during this session. As the game opens, the players immediately want to jump into harvesting body parts from Vorgal, the white dragon they just killed. As they approach the corpse, Matt quickly narrates that they see a tree sprouting out of the body. That's a cool thing that happens whenever Fenthras is used to kill someone, and Laura had specifically called it out in the last session, and Matt forgot to add it when he described Raishon finishing off Vorgal. So he's adding it now to make sure it doesn't get forgotten. And as Percy and Keyleth prepare to carve up Vorgal's corpse, Sam adds that Scanlan is looking for Tuma, the leader of the Ravenites. Meanwhile, Grog rushes to Vorgal's lair. Scanlan follows him and Vex rushes after them as well, mainly because she doesn't think anyone should go into that lair alone, especially the members of the party with the worst impulse control. On their way out of the ravine, they pass by some Ravenite warriors who are here to help fight the dragon. Grog just says, "Dragon that way," without clarifying that it's already dead. Sam asks if Tuma is among this group, but Matt says no, she's not. When the Ravenites arrive to find that the dragon is already dead, they start harvesting some body parts as well. Grog, Scanlan, and Vex, the looters, arrive at Vorgal's lair, a humongous column of ice with a huge bowl on the top, which is where he would sleep in that bowl. Some other Dragonborn are already cautiously approaching the lair, and Tuma is among them. Considering Sam asked about Tuma twice already, I feel like Matt specifically included her here to help give Sam whatever scene or interaction he's been looking for. Vex warns them not to enter the lair since there could be traps, and also some magic gems that could alert Thordak to what's happened here. And then Scanlan makes 2 requests of Tuma. First, he wants their help when they go to fight Thordak. Tuma basically says, no, it's not their fight and they don't have an army. But Scanlan tries to insist that Tuma owes them one. After all, the Ravenites were supposed to help with the Vorgal fight, but they were nowhere to be found. But Tuma pushes back. They did help by getting Vorgal where he needed to be for the trap, and then they did send soldiers to help with the fight. They just apparently got there too late. This argument reminds me a lot of the other times the players have called for the castle guards in the middle of a fight, but the guards usually don't show up until the fight is already over. It's something that we're probably going to discuss in a whole other video later this year because I understand both sides. The players are treating the world of the game like a real place, which is always a good thing, and there are authorities that are supposed to help with some of the problems the players face. On the other hand, Matt doesn't think that it'll be satisfying for the guards and soldiers to solve these problems for the players, and in most cases those guards would be fairly outmatched by the forces the players are fighting anyway. Remember how Grog never landed a hit on Vorgal and all the powerful warriors in the Herd of Storms got dissolved by Umbrasyl? I don't know why the players feel like these starving, desperate Ravenites would have fared any better in this fight. And besides, none of these reinforcements can just teleport to where they're needed. Matt has them off camera, far enough away that they're not going to be an easy solution for the players' problems. However, these Ravenites might be a lot more help in the Thordak fight, since they could scrap with his lizardfolk minions rather than fighting an ancient red dragon and getting vaporized. So Vex tries to convince them that they should help with that fight, but she takes a different tactic. She points out that this allegiance would give the Dragonborn a chance to begin interacting with the rest of the world, and Tuma is more receptive to that idea. She mentions that one of her goals is to make sure their new nation doesn't fall victim to the same mistakes that Draconia did. However, Matt doesn't have the player's role here, because Tuma still seems pretty non-committal to me. I feel like maybe Matt wants to leave the option open for Vox Machina to actually figure out a good way to use the Ravenites in the future, but they're not just going to swoop in to the Thordak fight like a bunch of Draconian knights, because they simply don't have those resources. So implying that they do wouldn't feel true to that situation. Not to get political in this D&D video, I know some of you hate that, but this is a lot like when the United States declined to intervene in the French Revolution in the years following the American Revolution. This new young nation that just escaped from its oppressors is just too weak and fragile. Getting involved could cost them everything they just worked so hard to get. Tuma also makes multiple references to how the gold from Vorgal's hoard is going to help them build their nation. And I think Matt is very deliberately reminding the players that a lot of this gold is either owed to the Ravenites, or at the very least, they're expecting to claim a good portion of it. We'll come back to that in a minute. Because before the party settles up, Scanlan has a second request.
We lost a friend in this fight, a Dragonborn. He's buried near here, we'll tell you where. We would like a proper tomb for him. on this hill where the dragon slept, could you build a statue, a fine statue, a handsome statue of Tiberius Stormwind and bury him underneath it? And on the pedestal, could you please write, "I encourage peace"?
She looks over at one of the nearby Dragonborn.
This is Corsa. He is our finest stonesmith. I will see to it that it is done.
Teach your people of him, your offspring, that he was a brave dragonborn who wanted to unify all of your peoples.
This can be done.
This is a really lovely gesture. It's the final time Tiberius is brought up in this campaign, and it's a really nice moment. I'm always a huge fan of the players taking the time to memorialize and honor their fallen companions. At the end of my Princes of the Apocalypse campaign, 3 of the 4 player characters were dead. So at the end of the final session, the remaining player character described how she had statues built to honor her fallen friends. After everything the player characters have done and all of their heroic deeds that they'd performed, I think it's really valuable to take the time and to make sure that they are honored as heroes. Of course, this scene is a little complicated for us as the audience, not because of the real-world context around Tiberius' departure, not just because of that, but because the version of Tiberius that Scanlan is describing is a lie. Tiberius never wanted a unification between the Draconians and the Ravenites. He was a prince, and he carried himself with the authority of someone who did believe he was better than the lower-class citizens of his nation. But Scanlan is a storyteller, and he understands the power of stories.
There's nothing in the world more powerful than a good story.
Okay, but imagine that actually made more sense in context and wasn't preceded by 4 seasons of lazy bullshit. Scanlan is effectively turning Tiberius into one of the good ones in order to absolve him of his nation's sins, even though he was far more complicated than that. And again, I don't mean that the player was complicated, although that's obviously true, but we saw that Tiberius was openly prejudiced towards the Ravenites. But this statue and this story can hopefully help steer the new culture to try to leave some of that pain behind by teaching that not all of the Draconians were bad. And hopefully, that will help the Ravenites do what Tuma just said she wanted. Leave some of their predecessors' flaws in the past where they belong. It is still a really lovely moment. Sure, it's a lie, and a bit of a selfish one since it just helps whitewash the memory of their friend, but I can also read this as something the new nation might need. A hero from the past who fought for a better world. Rather than idolizing Voragol for slaying their Draconian oppressors, they could remember the Draconians who wanted the Ravenites to be free, even if those people never existed, or at the very least, we certainly know that Tiberius wasn't one of them.
It's my estimation that every man ever got a statue made of him was one kind of sumbitch or another. Ain't about you, Jane. It's about what they need.
And of course, there's the metatextual reading of that as well. The idea that these players might want to reinforce the point that Orion himself wasn't a villain. I don't know the cast of Critical Role, so I don't know if that's what Sam was trying to say to the audience. I've certainly said my piece on the lessons we can learn from watching Orion, since I think painting him as a villain obscures the fact that anyone can make some of those same mistakes at their own tables. Something I know from personal experience. But I also understand why some viewers might watch this scene and interpret it as a message from the cast to basically only remember the good parts of their time with Orion, rather than lingering on his faults or his flaws. And maybe that was on Sam's mind, or maybe it wasn't. But either way, this is the last mention of Tiberius in the campaign, and it sends the character off with as much dignity as possible, cementing his legacy as a hero. Now, part of the reason this is so affecting is because Sam does such a great job describing this mythical version of Tiberius that he's creating. He uses just a few words to create something emotional and affecting. And that can be really hard to do, whether you're a player or a game master, especially when you're in the middle of a game and you feel like you're under the gun and your mind just goes blank. But thankfully, when you find yourself struggling for the words at the game table, you can get some help from today's sponsor, Describe. Describe is an incredible online toolkit that offers tens of thousands of pre-written scenes that you can read aloud at the game table. They've got scenes for players, like descriptions of your characters, or flavor for your spells, or badass one-liners you can drop into combat, or funny quips for role-playing scenes. And they've also got scenes for game masters, like descriptions of monsters and magic items and NPCs and environments and other planes of existence, like the Feywild or the Plane of Fire. And they've also got a full library of music that you can play at the table, so you can help cultivate an atmosphere just like the one Matt Mercer creates for his tables. And you can take advantage of all of those features and so many more by signing up for a membership. And if you visit describe.com/supergeek and use the promo code supergeek at checkout, you could save 10% off of your first subscription payment. Once again, that is dscryb.com/supergeek and use the promo code supergeek. Thank you so much to Describe for sponsoring this video. Meanwhile, as Scanlan was talking with Tuma, Grog has been entirely focused on just trying to find Voragol's treasure. Vex points out that the dragon's hoard is embedded under the ice inside the column itself, and Grog starts to pummel the ice, breaking through it to reach the frozen treasure. However, at Vex's urging, Grog finally asks permission for taking gold from the hoard.
Tuma, we are about to unsheath and reveal a great fortune, of which we have very little interest, because honestly it weighs us down. We're like plenty loaded already. However, it is kind of like a tradition to like take little bits here and there, like as keepsakes, you know.
The spoils here were largely collected from the wreckage of our captors. And much of the gold here was earned through our blood and turmoil. However, we were able to free ourselves and have access to this fortune, a great deal thanks to your aid. We are more than willing to divide this between your folk and ours.
I'm pretty impressed at how Matt threaded that needle. Tuma has already discussed how this gold will help them build their nation, but Matt also knows his players want to get their reward. It's standard practice at this point for the players to raid the hoard of whatever monster they slay. And the last time they raided the lair of an ancient dragon, Matt didn't give them the full reward that a dragon like that might have. He basically implied that Umbrasyl had a larger hoard somewhere else in Exandria. So this is really the first chance the players have to loot the lair of an ancient dragon. And so he wants to give them a chance to actually get to do that. Plus, by having Tuma agree to part with some of the treasure, Matt is essentially telling his players that part of this hoard would be enough to essentially build a brand new country from scratch. And that will hopefully help impress upon the heroes exactly how much gold they're about to get their hands on. A potentially nation-founding amount of wealth. And I think it's interesting that Matt doesn't make it a skill challenge to convince Tuma, because that effectively communicates to the party that they've already earned this reward. Plus, the member of the party most notorious for her greed is specifically pushing for temperance in this scene, making it clear that they need to share the wealth with the locals, so Matt just might be trying to reward that behavior. After all, if Vex sets aside her major character flaw, but she still has to roll to convince Tuma to let them walk away with just a small portion of their spoils, then if she rolls low, Matt would be forced to have Tuma deny that compromise, and that would not feel good. So while this interaction really surprised me when I first watched it, I actually think it's a bit of expert DMing. So then the players start digging through the hoard, and Matt has them each roll a die to determine how good they are at finding something interesting within this sea of wealth. And then he starts reading certain items off of a list he already has prepared. As he describes a potion, we overhear Travis say that this is his favorite part: getting new shit. They each find some art objects or pieces of jewelry. For example, Grog finds a golden war mask, and then they each find some potions or magic items. Scanlan finds a platinum greatsword, which he hands off to Grog. They also spot a gold-plated ship mast deep within the ice, with a ship barely visible beneath. They decide to come back for that tomorrow, once the Ravenites have dug out more of the loot. Matt also says that they find 18,000 gold and 12,000 platinum, which is 1/3 of the total hoard. And Vex keeps saying this is plenty, but all the other players at the table are just so thrilled with how much loot they just got.
20,000 gold. Yeah.
Vex, we don't need to tell the others about
They
this.
don't need to know.
We could just go to a warm place, the three of us, and just live out the rest of our days.
We'll build a bank. Like, it will just be us.
They'll never find us.
Right.
We have
I'm
the dust of
tempted.
tracelessness.
This is
Yeah,
amazing.
we kill Vex after like the first
Wait,
one.
I can hear you.
I was joking.
We might need her to restart civilization.
True.
Oh, you know what? Let's go back. You lost me. I'm out.
Matt also tells the other players how much dragon remains they just collected. Again, it's a whole bunch of teeth and scales and blood. But between everything they just recovered, especially from the hoard, they need to figure out how to get it all home. So Grog makes some more room in the bag of holding.
Dwarven
Grog
armor.
is dumping stuff out of
going.
our bag of
So
holding.
one black-studded dwarven armor suit, because the Pike's the only one that wears full armor. There's another full set of just regular plate armor. That's going
Gone.
Could we
There's
make...
a
Pulling
totally
an Elder
decomposed
Scrolls.
orc head, a brain chunk,
Forgot about that.
two dark elf heads, one random arm, a piece of bullet armor.
Shit has been
a
festering for
Yeah,
months.
man.
12 beef jerky strips are going. That looks
I was
like it's
saving
about 10
that.
years old.
I was
Record,
saving
As
that.
you're doing this, Tuma's watching you just going,
By the way, this is totally up for grabs anytime you want. You just say something to me and we'll work it out.
"Is he not Dutch?" And walks over. Another Dragonborn walks over and just picks up the beef jerky strips. Hands them to Tuma, and Tuma just keeps watching you while chewing on one.
They're starving.
Right, yeah. Those are like super fresh.
If not in civilization.
And beef
I'm
jerky.
throwing out a great sword and replacing the platinum great sword with it. So that should make enough weight out. Bar black studded dwarven armor. That was the first thing.
By the way, excellent note-taking on and keeping track of what's been in the bag of holding.
That's great.
Well done.
Half of that body part stuff just came out as like gelatinous poo.
Yeah, it's the gamiest of gamey meat you've ever touched.
Just
in
like
your...
strings. Of,
Oh yeah, yeah.
You like pull it up and you gotta like wrap it up in the string and then toss it.
It is why I love the word slaw.
Now, as I watch this whole sequence of the party finding gold and magic items and dragon bits, it occurs to me, hardly any of this had to be done at the game table. I'm thinking back to my 4th edition campaign from like 12 years ago, and if the party found a whole bunch of gold at the end of a game, then in between sessions I would just send my players an email and let them know how much treasure they found and how much XP they got. These days I would probably have a specific channel for it in a group Discord server, or maybe there would be some way to share the information through some sort of online resource that allows you to play the game through the website. This video is not sponsored by one of those resources, but I'll simply speculate and say that I bet a bunch of them could do that just fine. One nice advantage of sending these sort of updates through text is that you have a clear written record of it, so your players don't have to worry about furiously writing everything down as you read it aloud to them. But also in a much larger sense, sending these updates in between games means your game session doesn't have to be bogged down with this type of bookkeeping. Now, with very few exceptions, the Vox Machina campaign never handles any sort of bookkeeping or logistics in between sessions away from the table. Matt will give them experience points and they'll level up away from the table, but that's basically it. And even with their level ups nowadays, they actually roll for their hit points on screen in special videos that uploaded to the channel in between episodes. So we really are a witness to basically everything the players do, at least as far as their communication with Matt goes as a group. Sure, he might still talk with some of them independently about clarifying rules or adjusting a subclass or hashing out the details of their backstory, but we don't ever really get any sense that Matt shares group messages with his players in between games, and particularly not in regards to logistics like this. And in fact, his players just roleplay everything that happens to their characters, because with the pace of their games, there's basically no opportunity for these logistics to be handled in between sessions. But with some of the things they handle at the game table, they could really just do it at home over text messages or in an email chain, and their game might run a little bit faster because these logistics are being handled away from the table. In this session, Matt has the looters roll to figure out what they find in the hoard. But why? There's no rush. The players can take as much time as they want to sort through the hoard. If he's just trying to figure out which items each player character finds, okay, that's fine. But that's something he could have rolled for himself at home. Or he could have asked everyone to roll a die and just had them roll a d20 digitally, or record a video of themselves rolling a physical die and then send those results to him over text. Yes, players could cheat when they do that, but anytime I hear somebody make that argument, what if the players cheat? I always respond by saying that if you don't trust your players to roll without your supervision, you shouldn't play with them at all. But okay, you might say, sure, that makes sense for the gold they discovered, but what about harvesting dragon parts from the body? Don't they need to roll for that? Well, sure, but aside from the fact that, once again, they could have just rolled at home, what's the consequence for failure if they roll poorly? Every time they harvest body parts from a dragon, they're basically rolling to figure out how much they're able to harvest. But unlike when they were trying to fulfill a contract for the Slayer's Take, there's no real consequence to failing these rolls anymore. And I'm sure part of the reason I feel that way is because they've always harvested way more dragon body parts than they have ever used, because there is no system in place for using whatever dragon parts or demon parts they collect from the bodies of their fallen foes. If your players are interested in collecting the body parts of enemy monsters, that's totally fine. It's actually awesome. But you need to introduce some sort of system for them to actually use those parts. And by that I mean someone willing to buy them, or rules for making stuff, which they could make during the downtime session these players never get to take. Ask the players what they want to do with these dragon parts and use that to figure out what you should do and what you should add to the game. Right now, the primary reason they seem to collect these body parts seems to be because they think it'll be valuable to some other NPC. They're gonna get a lot of gold for it, probably. So what Matt really should do is have an NPC approach the party and say that they have some project they could use these dragon scales for, or they could use this dragon blood to create a potion of resistance or something. Even if the party decides not to sell the body parts and just try to brew the potion themselves, that would still give the players some idea that there is something they could do with these parts. When Vex tried to sell the body parts to Vanessa at the Slayer's Take and was gently reminded that that's not how the business works at the Slayer's Take, I genuinely don't know why Matt didn't have Vanessa recommend some other NPC who might be willing to use the body parts. Or maybe the next time they sat down for a Council of Elrond meeting in Whitestone, Allura or Gilmore could have said, "It's a shame you didn't collect any dragon teeth. I could have maybe enchanted an oil you could coat your weapons with to do a little extra damage for a single attack." And then the players would feel like enormous geniuses for having the foresight to actually collect the body parts required for that recipe in advance. And yes, part of the problem here is that the magic items in 5th edition take forever to create, but I still maintain that there is a solution here where Matt could still honor the logistics of this magical world, but also make sure his players aren't just wasting their time on a bunch of busy work that is apparently never going to matter. Now, I want to be really clear here. If your group knows that they could handle all these logistics away from the table, but instead chooses to do them all together at the table because it's easier for them, that is totally fine. Maybe your group is just not very responsive to text messages, and it's hard enough to just figure out the logistics of scheduling without also trying to ask them to do some homework away from the table. That is totally fine. I get it. That makes sense. Or maybe your players just want to take a more low-key episode so they can cool down a bit after the stressful dragon fight. That definitely seems to be the pattern on Critical Role, so it's fair for me to assume that these players would just rather take a whole session and handle this bookkeeping because that's the way they want to play. Again, okay, fair enough. When I watch this episode, I legitimately wonder if the players know that they could handle a lot of this stuff away from the table. Sure, okay, this is a live stream game, and Critical Role fans are famously very weird about feeling like they're missing out on stuff, so maybe there is no reality where Matt Mercer will ever text his players a list of art objects and magic items in between sessions. But for those of us watching Critical Role and looking for tricks that we can employ to make our own games more fun, I want to make sure that you know that taking an entire session to sift through a dragon's hoard is not the only way to do things. I'm not saying this game session should have been an email, but this game session definitely could have been an email. But since these players are handling these logistics at the table, we watch as they return to the mansion and take a short rest to identify all the magic items they found. And Matt gives them all the cards for the Potion of Speed, a Potion of Invulnerability, Boots of Feral Leaping, which don't require attunement, so they go directly to Grog, and a Ring of Invisibility. And Grog determines that his golden Moor mask is not magical, so that's just another cool art object like some of the others that they found. They also discover that the Platinum Sword is a Holy Avenger, which can only be wielded by a Paladin. Now, Vax is a Paladin, but he doesn't use two-handed weapons. He just doesn't have the strength score for it. So instead they give the Holy Avenger to Kima. Now, I'm kind of two minds on this one. I don't think Matt ever assumed that Vax was going to use the Holy Avenger. My guess is that Matt rolled randomly for the treasure that would be in this hoard, and he got an item that he knew no one in the party was ever going to use. But he left it in the hoard, knowing that the players would probably give it to Kima. It's possible that he chose the item specifically so the other players would give it to Kima, but considering what we already know about how Matt runs his NPCs, I don't think that's very likely. But honestly, how you handle things like this at your table really does depend on how you run your NPCs, because there is a long-standing stereotype around DMPCs, which is that the DM includes the characters so they can basically get a chance to play in their own game, which is fine if they're not taking up the spotlight and you're trading off DMing duties so you can actually get to play that character sometimes. But if you're just running the full campaign and also playing in it with your own character, that's when things get pretty dodgy. Because the worst case scenario of this is that the DM includes the best magic items, which also happen to be items that only their player character could use the best. So their character becomes this ultra powerful badass in the game they're running. This is actually the experience Matt Mercer had as a player the first time he played in the game. He's talked about how he only got started as a dungeon master because his first dungeon master was not very good and was giving all the best magic items to their own character. And that's why Matt doesn't run his NPCs the way a typical or a stereotypical DMPC is run. They don't get the best magic items, they're not the center of the story, and as we discussed in a different video, they never really get a chance to kill the big bad guys. Matt will sometimes talk about how Allura is essentially his surrogate in the game. She's basically the most like him in real life, I guess, but Allura really never steals the spotlight from the other players. So when these players find a Holy Avenger in the treasure pile, it doesn't feel like Matt is giving his own character a magic item because that's just not how he typically runs the game. So the players genuinely feel better about handing this weapon off to their friend who has helped them in battle many times, despite the fact that Matt gave them this item that they're going to now give to his character. He can get away with this basically because his players know that he's not doing this to screw them over or pad up his own character. They're literally in the middle of a mission to make sure each one of their characters gets a special magic item all on their own, and these NPCs never dominate the campaign, so he's earned enough goodwill at this point to allow a magic item to get included in the hoard that he knows is probably going to end up back in his own hands. And this also gives the players a chance to give a magic item to their ally, who they just recently had some friction with just a couple of episodes ago, and essentially continue to strengthen their friendship and their bond in battle with Kima. However, if you run your NPCs so they do steal kills and get the best magic items and they're the center of the story and they're the most important characters in the campaign, well, first of all, stop it. But also, if that's how you run your game, then I definitely cannot recommend you include a special paladin weapon for your own special paladin, because you're not playing the game or running the game in such a way that's going to feel fair or fun to your players. Anyway, once they've identified these items, Keyleth takes the Spire of Conflux down to the training room to test it out. The staff has 20 charges, and she can use some of them to cast spells, like Fireball, Chain Lightning, and Conjure Elemental, among others. Now, at first glance, this is a lot like when they took Fastbender down to the training room and ran him through some exercises to figure out how he worked. However, in that example, they didn't actually know what Fastbender's stats were. Here, Marisha has already had the item card for a week, so this is Marisha's way of narratively explaining how Keyleth knows what the staff can do. And I honestly hope that this is just how Marisha wants to play the game because she thinks it's fun, and not because she feels like it's necessary in order for the campaign to make sense, because once again, there's no time gap in between sessions for the players to say things like, oh, after the last game, my character went down to the training room and used the staff to cast a bunch of spells, and now she knows what her vestige is and how it works. If she's doing this because she thinks it's fun, then cool, that's awesome. But if she's doing this because she feels like the story won't make sense if she doesn't do it because there's no other opportunity to explain how she got familiar with the item, then once again, as a Dungeon Master, I would really want to make sure my players know that they could take time to do these things between games if they'd rather handle things that way. Although speaking of things that happen in between sessions, it's also worth mentioning that after she got the item card at the end of the last game, Marisha made a little game of it on social media where I think every day she would post a picture of one section of the card, like the bottom left corner, and then the next day she'd post like the middle right side, and then over the course of 6 posts, she basically revealed the full card. And I'm pretty sure that she didn't posted a single image of the item card, so it'd be a lot easier to read. But this is just a fun way to sort of draw out a little bit more suspense and tease people with hints of what it could do. Like imagine all you saw about this item was that it had 20 charges, but you didn't know what else it could do for like another day or two. It was just a fun little game. And of course, some people complained that she was torturing the audience because people have always been super duper weird about Marisha, but I already made a whole video about that. But speaking of people being tortured, weird transition, I know, but stay with me. Vex and Vax get some wine from a wine cellar, and while they're down there, Vax asks how long Vex is going to torture herself by not acting on what she wants. See, I told you it makes sense. At first, Vex plays dumb and pretends she doesn't know what Vax is talking about. And then she says she doesn't think Percy feels the same way as she does, which Vax denies. And then Vex shares another excuse.
I don't know, darling. It just seems so trivial, doesn't it?
What the fuck do we have in this world except for moments with each other? That's all we've got.
This is a really lovely scene. And this is the kind of reason that your players should feel like they can take a downtime session if that's what they want to do. This party just loves to do low-stakes wrap-up episodes to catch their breath after a big fight. So the question is, does this episode live up to what they want from that kind of session?
We're gonna go ahead and take a break here. We'll come back here in just a minute.
Well, we haven't done shit.
Yeah. That's not true. You've discussed the spoils from your last major
This is true, see?
story bit. So
Apparently not. I know I'm beating a dead horse at this point, but I really feel like if Matt had allowed the players to handle some of this bookkeeping and logistics away from the table, then there would have been more room in this session for the players to do these kinds of role-playing scenes that they seem to really enjoy. I'm also thinking of all the time throughout this campaign when Matt has tried to fast forward through a long rest only for someone to cut him off and add some other detail that they want to handle, some other logistics they want to figure out because that's what they would do during a long rest. The reason they do that is for the same reason so much of this session has been taken up with stuff that they didn't need to do at the table. Matt never gives them the chance to handle these logistics off-screen, off-table. And again, for the most part, it leads to fun sessions that the players all seem to really enjoy. I think this episode is very much the exception that reveals the potential pitfalls of this approach to running your campaign this way, where this game is hyper-serialized and nothing new happens between sessions. And for those of us who aren't streaming our games, I think there are much better ways to structure our sessions so the mundane bookkeeping aspects are either handled away from the table or can get knocked out in just a few minutes at the start of a session. Because I feel like that would free up the players for the kind of shenanigans that actually make these sessions more memorable. And speaking of shenanigans, Percy and Keyleth fuse the war mask to the back of Grog's horn so we can have a scary face looking behind him if anybody flanks him during battle. And then they want to present it to him as theatrically as possible. So Keyleth transforms into an elephant. Percy gets on her back and then they break through the doorway of the mansion. Or they try to, but it takes a few tries. And then there are thundering attempts to smash down a wall, alert the others to some sort of danger, which Grog and Scanlan rush toward, and since they only see a random elephant they don't recognize, and they can't see Percy because he's out of sight on the other side of the doorframe, they just launch some attacks on the elephant. And she fights back because... I don't really know why she fights back. I think the players are just feeling goofy. But once Grog drops Keyleth out of elephant form, she says, "The elephant ate me, and you saved me," and then they present the helmet to Grog. See, that's the kind of shenanigans that they should just be able to do for the full session. That's what this game should be. The next morning, Matt describes how it's slightly warmer in the valley to foreshadow the fact that Voragol's death means that the unnatural winter storm is going to be lifted from the area. They return to the Horde to check out the ship, while Vax goes to check out the cradle on top where Vorgal slept. He's wearing the Ring of Invisibility to make sure that he can't get noticed by the scrying gems. And since this ring is basically Bilbo's ring from The Hobbit, and Liam played Gollum a few times in some Lord of the Rings video games, and since this episode aired in the final days of the 2016 election, everything comes full circle for a perfect joke.
Precious.
So you have to attune
Wait, hold
to
on,
that.
I can't even. Nasty. Thank you.
It's cheating. It's just cheating. Nasty woman.
Nasty woman, yeah.
She's a nasty woman.
Oh, I may need a ringtone later.
Remember when we laughed about the idea that Trump could ever become the president? Good times. Now as they send Vax up there, Scanlan once again mentions that he really wants to do something with these gems, like try to pose as Voragol and fool Thordak. This is exactly the same thing that he suggested the last time they came here, and then he also suggested the same thing when they found out that Ripley was eavesdropping on them through Percy's gun. It seems like Sam just wants to fool a bad guy to lead them off their trail somehow. As a dungeon master, I don't know how I would grant that wish, but I would definitely take note of the fact that Sam wants to seize on the opportunity to use these listening devices for some subterfuge. The problem is that they'd already spoiled the chance to fool Ripley by talking openly around the gun when they first discovered the enchantment, and trying to fool the dragons is just way too risky. There's basically no margin of error at all. But maybe I'd try to introduce a listening device that's linked to a villain who isn't as wildly powerful as the dragons, but doesn't have the same leg up on the party that Ripley did. Meanwhile, the party gets a better look at the ship now that more of it has been defrosted. It's a dwarven navy ship designed to break through ice chunks, and the damage suggests that Vorgal probably moved it here from his old lair. This isn't explicitly stated, but it seems like, given the detail that Matt describes, it seems clear that this icebreaker probably accidentally crossed paths with Vorgal near his old lair, or maybe it was part of a deliberate mission to attack him. Either way, it's cool how we can conclude that based on the little detail that Matt provides. However, in order to actually get into the ship, they would either have to break through some more ice or break through the deck itself. This is really good DMing from Matt. Once again, the Ravenites are going to do all the work for the party. If you want to keep going and fully explore this ship, you're going to have to work for it a little bit. They try just melting the ice, blocking their way, but it's too thick for that. So they slam the ice and break some of it, but thanks to their rolls, a whole section of the frozen pillar collapses, reburying the majority of the ship in ice and snow. At the top of the column, Vax has to dodge the ice crumbling below him, but then he gets a good look at the seeing stones. He can see 2 of them embedded in the wall. But the last time they were here, there were 3 stones visible. And it's possible the 3rd stone fell when part of the layer just collapsed. And it's possible the other dragons noticed that disturbance and they could know something's up. Now, my first thought was that the 3rd stone was disposed of when Umbrasyl died, but that's not how the players interpret it. And honestly, based on Matt's description, they very well might be right. So this kind of lights a fire under the party's ass. They tell Tuma they need to leave soon. But before they leave, Keyleth will revitalize their plant life to restore it to what it was like before Voragol froze everything. So Keyleth takes 8 hours to cast plant growth and revitalize the Ravenites' crops. Okay, when I said this lit a fire under the party's ass, I might have oversold things a little bit. Now, in fairness, Matt starts to fast forward through this 8-hour chunk of time, but Vax and Scanlan make a joke about peeing in the snow and making it a contest, and then Matt has them roll for it, and so now they're doing a pissing contest. It's a quick moment, but it basically extends the invitation to the other players. If you want to play around in this 8-hour window a little bit, we could do that. So Vex takes Percy aside, and they go for a walk in the forest. Vex tells Percy about how the word Fenthras, the name of her bow, means growth and renewal, and so it's ironic that Sondor held it for so long, considering he represented the opposite of that idea. And Vex finally confesses to someone that Sondor's lingering bitterness about his betrayal got into her head a little bit, and then she spent a lot of time ruminating on every shitty thing she's ever done. But then she references Percy forgiving Ripley, and what a big deal that was. And she shows him that she carved a new word into Fenthras, Sineath, which is Elven for forgive, because she realized that forgiveness is the only way to grow. And Percy admits that forgiveness wasn't about giving Ripley peace. It was about finding his own peace. He also says there are horrible things he's done as well, but when he says that, she cuts him off and says that he has to forgive the younger version of himself as well. What Percy did in his youth was completely understandable, and Percy can't keep holding it against himself. And he admits he is making progress with that, meaning he hasn't gotten there yet, but he knows he needs to. That's a sentiment that I'm sure a lot of us can relate to, considering we're currently making New Year's resolutions. Okay, this is the part of the video that was supposed to be more relevant when I thought it was going to come out on the 2nd. But, you know, we're all trying to make resolutions and hopefully become better people. But having written reminders can be really helpful. And so Vex says that the inscription she carved into the bow is a reminder that when she attacks an enemy, she's not doing so out of anger. And this is just a really nice moment between them. And then everything changes.
As I walk away, I walk up, I kiss her. So we'll talk later. And I walk away.
Anything can happen in the woods.
And it's 10 o'clock. We're gonna go ahead and end tonight's
Bam! Bam!
This is the big thing that happens in this episode. And I like that we can basically see Taliesin read this scene as it plays out and figure out that he's got an opening for Percy to act on their mutual feelings. Sure, as a player, he knows that Vex has just been encouraged to act on her feelings and try to tell Percy how she feels, but he also goes through this really lovely scene and realizes that this is also just a good way to justify Percy realizing that Vex has feelings for him and that he should do something about that. I also think it's interesting that the other players don't have anywhere near the same extreme levels of contact embarrassment as they did when Vax kissed Keyleth. And that's probably for two reasons. First, when Vax and Keyleth started discussing their feelings, most of their players didn't even know romance was a thing in D&D, so they essentially behaved like school kids watching the first members of their friend group starting to couple up, and being really immature about it. That's the way the cast describes it as well, that they were just stunned that romance was a thing that could happen in this game, and they didn't know what to do about that fact, so they were just awkward about it. However, I don't think that's the full truth, because if you'll recall, a lot of the other players had no idea Vax had feelings for Keyleth. Vex knew and had even made a comment about it, Tiberius also referenced it when he was drunk, but the actual declaration of love and the kiss kind of seemed to come out of nowhere for a lot of people. So when it happened, it kind of caught them all off guard. Now with Percy and Vex, once again the players often discussed how Persalia benefited from not being the first to discuss romance or share a kiss, but also, we've had a lot more foreshadowing for this storyline. My Heart Is Someone Else's and It's Yours were both way more explicit confirmations of Vex's feelings than anything Vax did before kissing Keyleth. And so by the time this moment came along, the other players weren't awkward about it. Instead, they were cheering it on because they had essentially started shipping Percy and Vex together. They weren't surprised it happened, they were rooting for it to happen sooner. Now, I think if you're going to pursue a romance in the game, you should talk to the other player and make sure they're cool with it. Not everyone wants to be romance in their D&D games. But once you've done that, then I think it's important to take your time and make sure it feels earned. And that's definitely what Laura and Taliesin did with this subplot. And as Matt already said, that is the end of the episode. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks to discuss episode 73, The Coming Storm. Vox Machina is getting ready for war against Thordak, so it's time to draw up some battle plans. Also, I get this episode title wrong a lot because it sounds a lot like one of the Doctor's nicknames in Doctor Who. He's called the Oncoming Storm, so I'm probably going to get that wrong at least once, especially because I've been watching a lot of Doctor Who this past month for reasons you'll understand in a couple of weeks. Because I've got a lot of really cool videos in the works for this month, and I cannot wait for you to see them. If you want to catch all these videos, you know the drill. Like, subscribe, ring the bell, consider supporting me on Patreon or becoming a YouTube member, and sign up for my newsletter. All those links are in the doobly-doo below. Until next time, play fair and have fun. Shoot, sorry. Gotta go.
Don't worry, everyone. I know what you want to see. I know what you want from Mike. And I'm gonna make it happen. Just you wait. It's gonna be a really great year. See you soon.